Hello, this is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Melissa von Musser, your CEO and founder, and an international master coach. You previously were a platinum coach for Tony Robbins' organization, and so I wanted to give the folks on air or online that background. But I want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Excited to be here.
We've got a URL for you as your Instagram.com/ Melissa von Musser. That'll be fully clickable when we're published. And
Awesome.
I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. If you haven't checked that out, you can use coupon code a Ghost and check that out for 30 days. That's a audio only platform that we're featured on. We'll be on there later tonight. But again, thank you for being on the show. We're going to talk about ways to create an empowered identity to create a life that you really want. And from there, I always ask guests a couple of questions, standard questions I ask any guest. Basically, what motivates you? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I have a dog that's got a bone. It's making me
That's
crazy.
all right. Yeah, I got a pet. I got a cat. Sometimes she tries to run in here. But what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
What motivates me is the power of quality coaching. I found coaching at a really pivotal point in my life, and it was life-saving for me. And so I'm passionate about helping people create a life that they want and to stack life in their favor. So that journey has led me all the way to here. So I love helping people have a good life, create one they like.
That's awesome because everybody finds the point where they are now is kind of like a journey, how you
Mhm.
get there. So like what transpired to make you want to become a coach?
A lot of heavy things, but in a nutshell, I had gone through a divorce from someone that had cheated prolifically on me. It was very tumultuous. It was very traumatic.
Mm,
On the heels of that, both my parents died about a year apart. And on the heels of that, I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
wow.
And so all of those things collided and caused me to become suicidal, to become depressed, suicidal, and to just ask, what's the point? And that led me to coaching.
Yeah, there's always like a traumatic, and I've talked to a lot of people on the podcast. This is actually episode 1000, 130, 140.
Holy
And
cow.
and we've talked to a lot of people who have, a lot of artists, and they tend to go through trauma, and that's how they create. They use that as like the basis for the reason for being.
Right.
They take it and they turn it into art, and they find a way to process it. You took it like an art, a creative type of person, and found a way to process it into a positive action, which is, I think it's creative to do what you're doing just as much as any artist. Um, but like that kind of power that you can take like that trauma and turn it into something that then makes you want to continue. And maybe
Right.
you can talk about that story because I think it's like a universal concept, but it's everybody experiences it in their own individual way.
Well, it was really interesting for me because when I went, my oldest son bought me a ticket to go to a coaching event, and he knew that I was suicidal, and he was really worried about me. When your young kids buy you a ticket to something, you go. And so I went kicking and screaming. I was in a Mexican standoff with God. I was angry. I was pissed off. I was done. I was just done. And the event, Brooke didn't know what the title of the event was going to be. They made a big reveal opening night, and it was very eye-opening for me. That opening night, the theme of that event was how to live like you were dying, based on the Tim McGraw song. And the whole event was how to live in the face of big trial and tribulation. And what happened for me in the course of that event is I saw all these ugly things that had happened in my life, all these traumatic, unfortunate, unjust things now had new meaning and they had new purpose. And it was almost like there was an audible God experience that said, you have a reason to be here. And all these things led to this moment so you can understand and help people that are in the same situation. And so that one event changed the course of my life because I found meaning. The old meaning I had given my life was ugly. It was dark. It was unnecessary, unfair, unjust. But I got to change what that all meant in that moment and decide. I got to choose life, and I got to choose a life I wanted to live in. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
as an artist, I always try to find like a lot of times there's like discordance or discontent. As a musician, we talk about like
right.
frequency, right? So
I'm big
like
on frequency.
if you're out of alignment, you're out of tune. Like
Correct.
you don't feel that discordance in your life. You're like things aren't fitting, things are like jarring, things aren't working. And then sometimes like there's these universal truths, like universal keys to musicians. Like we start to hit that certain key,
The
the
sweet spot.
crowd's yeah, the crowd's gonna vibe, the band's gonna vibe, everybody's gonna vibe.
Right.
And sometimes they have these things in at a microcosm level. Like you have something and then suddenly you hear something or you see something or you feel something. And suddenly like everything that was discordant now makes sense. Now makes
It
actually
did.
fits into a picture and like, oh, I can use this as a resource. Right? Is that how it felt?
Yeah. So it kind of went from acid jazz to a symphony.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it was like. And over time, I built on that and I proved that those truths were real. And I created a life stacking on those truths to create, in the face of a lot of drama and trauma. Life didn't just become perfect because I made that
Mhm.
decision. I wish it had, but it didn't. But I now had tools and I now had a belief system that allowed me to see the beauty in all of it. So it was very different from one side of that event to the other side of that event.
Yeah, a lot of times when I work with artists, is like they're always looking to be like perfect. And I'm always telling a lot of people is like imperfection
No,
is the key to all art.
that's
Like
correct.
it's the actual if you're a little bit off time, if you're a little bit off key, you have something that was not expected, that's usually what makes it. And it might sound jarring or it might not sound like other things. So you can get into a comparison trap where you just want to do
Correct.
what everybody's doing, right? And then you're like in tune with the crowd. But sometimes you have to be a little bit on the cutting edge, and sometimes that means it's not going to match what has done before, what was
Correct.
done before, and it's not perfect. It's like what we call it, like happy accidents, right? The happy accident actually is going to be more valuable than the perfect,
Correct.
tonal thing. The perfect tonal thing usually is boring.
Well,
It's not gonna work all the time.
no, it's not. I think that's one of the things that I don't love about AI in the music space. I don't want perfection. Perfection's a lie.
Yeah,
And
don't
so it lacks authenticity, it lacks the soul. There's no soul in perfection. And so to me, those one-off notes that are just a little too long, a little too low, a little too sharp, they are there to keep us engaged with the human that's performing. It's
yeah, I
part of
like
the journey.
yeah, it's like why I like to listen to Neil Young because I
Mhm.
like the fact that he has this kind of shaky voice. They used to call me
Yep.
he had this kind of nickname, the shaky, because he'd do this kind of pitch shakiness. There's some
Oh, I
people,
loved
if
it.
you have an audio engineer or producer, they say, well, get rid of that, right? Go and sing like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Right.
But when he actually does his solo work or his Crazy Horse work, he has this kind of off pitch that's a little shaky, and the Crazy Horse is kind of off. There's like his grandfather of punk, and you're like,
Exactly.
it's not exactly perfect, and it's actually great because it's not. And this is where the AI and the robotics and all these automation things and people sampling
That's
things that
right.
were done before is kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
It's like I spend a lot of
It's
time
flat.
with like analog in actual real instruments. And there's a whole kind of, there's a lot of people say, well, I don't need to do that. I can just use my laptop. I'm like, well, then
You
it sounds
can,
too
but
anesthetic. It's like there's something about playing a real instrument or an analog transistor Moog or a Hammond organ.
yeah,
There's something
exactly.
about playing that. Like, yeah, you gotta learn how to do it. You gotta do your 1,000 hours of work, right?
That's right.
You gotta put that the work in. But there's a reward for that level of authenticity, and
That's
it's
correct.
vulnerability. And some people are scared to be vulnerable because
I'd
they
say a
think
lot of
everybody's
people
gonna
are
hate
scared to be
it.
vulnerable. Most people are scared to be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's true.
They are. They're afraid. That's why public speaking and performing is the top fear of most human beings. That means I'm getting out there and I run the risk of looking stupid. That means I'm not perfect. So that's where that fear lives. But to me, that's the beauty is in the imperfection. Those happy accidents are beautiful gifts to the planet. And so are we as people. I'm not perfect. I don't declare to be perfect. I'm far from that. But that's where I believe I'm divine, in my imperfection. So I'm all about that frequency thing, because I believe we're all energy. And I think that when I made the decision, my energy shifted. I was able to change the frequency by what I focused on.
And the thing is, like, as long as you live, there's always like a teaching moment. There's like, to me, it's like Bowie said this thing where he said, I like treading water as an artist. He said, what does that mean? I like to go into areas where I'm not the best.
That's right.
I like to go and change. And I could have just stayed as Ziggy Stardust. I could have just done that. I could have stayed that for the rest of my career. But he chose to change into different theatrical versions of himself. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But like as an artist, he would go sing with Luther Vandross, who actually could
Right.
totally sing better than him, or play with Stevie Ray Vaughan, who could play better guitar than he could ever play. But it's like sometimes you push yourself into areas where you're not the best, and you learn. It's like, why not do that? And it's hard because like a lot of people, like, they want to be able to kind of phone it in, have a known,
Right.
right? They don't want the known.
They want the wealth and the fame, but they don't want to do the work that takes to get there. It's one of the things I loved about Prince. Prince was epic because he changed so many times. His whole thing was, there's a next level. And beyond that, there's going to be another level, and there's another instrument I need to learn. And then I can bring them all together. I mean, he was genius in his ability to dance in imperfection. And that's what made him perfect.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is the industry doesn't know what to do with people like that.
That's right.
Because it's like, you could do Purple Rain all day. It's like, well, that's boring. I'm not going to do it, right? The first time he ever got a contract, they were going to have Maurice White when he was 17, the guy from Earth, Wind, and Fire. They told him, hey, he's going to produce your first record. And he's like, he thought he would be thrilled. He said, no, I'm going to do it all myself, and I'm going to play all the instruments. They're like,
what?
We've got Maurice White. He's a known Grammy Award-winning producer. You don't think you should go with him? You're 17. And he's like, nope, I'm going to do it myself. And it's like, that was kind of the beginning of knowing, kind of, as a lot of artists don't know that.
That's right. They're not willing to take the risk.
They would have got pushed into Maurice. Yeah, they would have got pushed into it, and he would have never sounded like he did if he had done that. Because
just imagine if he hadn't taken that stand. Imagine what his music would have sounded like. They would have totally over-engineered it. It would have lost the soul of Prince. That was his magic. The fact that he was willing to take that risk.
Because you get people, any kind of artist you are, any kind of job you're in, like sometimes you have to kind of like push the envelope, and like you're the only person saying this, and then you don't do it all the time. But it's like, if you really believe in it, you got to put your hand up. And people, like, you can go back to high school, junior high, it's like, how many people are willing to put their hand up? People are scared to be the one. They say, well, I'm going to say something and ask a stupid question. There's no stupid question. It's like, you have to learn, because you got to put it out there. Like, if you never put it out there, you're not going to learn. So
that's right.
It's a hard thing to deal with, because people, they have these kind of fragile selves, right? And so if you get too many hits, it's like you back off, and then you don't participate, and then you get internal, and then things go on in your head, and then you never talk to anybody. And that's a bad place to be. So how do you get out of that space?
How do you get out of that space?
Yeah.
Well, I believe that when we spend so much time in our head, and there's a quote that we throw around in the coaching world, that when you're in your head, you're dead. When you want to get connected, when you want to connect to source, or you want to connect to an audience, or you want to connect to a client, it's not from here. Passion lives in your heart. Passion's a heart thing. So if I want to serve somebody, I can't do it intellectually. I need to connect to them soul to soul. That's a heart thing. So for me, when I'm in a dark place, or I have a client in a dark place, I need to ask a different question, because when we ask better questions, we get better answers, right? So when somebody's really dark, they're obsessing or focused on how they're going to fix it, how they're going to get out of it, how they're going to change it. And that works to a certain percentage of about 20% is what you should focus on. The 80% you should really engage when you're in that dark place isn't how, but who do I want to be? Who have I been in the past when I've been able to get out of a dark place, do something hard, face some big fear? Who was I when I made that happen? The who question moves you out of your head and into your heart, which is where your passion lives. That's where your ability to connect is. That's musicians that clinically do it. They know the clinical ways to write a symphony or put chords together or do something like that. They can do it from a classical position. But to really engage is to take that knowledge and drop it into your heart and connect to the soul of the listener. What do they need? Who do they need me to be? Who have I been when I've gotten out of the dark? Who do I know that's gotten out of the dark before me? I can model after them. So it's more a who thing. If anybody's out there right now and they're struggling, wanting to get out of bed or wanting to get up and do another day, change the questions. Stop asking, how am I going to want to get up tomorrow? And start asking, who do I need to be to get up tomorrow? That's a whole different shift physically.
It's a totally different place to be, because a lot of people, you're trauma informed. I'm a cancer survivor, age 27.
Wow.
Congrats. The pre-cancer version of me would never do what I'm doing now.
Right.
It was actually because of the cancer, I decided, because I beat it, I'm 56. That at the time when I beat it, I said, well, why am I scared to do things? I beat cancer. So I ended up traveling, living in Japan. I got married. I ended up, doing music, getting in a band, being out front. And it was all these things that put me out. I was doing poetry contest. I would have never gone on an open mic and done a poetry slam. The pre-cancer version of myself. But then I said, well, if I can beat that, why should I be scared? Not that I'm not scared of things that you don't try. You have to just kind of measure things.
Right. You don't go jump off a cliff and ask, should I have done that?
Yeah. But it's just in terms of, mountain bike. I downhill mountain bike, so it's almost like that. Almost
okay, like so you're a risky guy.
Yeah, but it's just like when I had the cancer, that first thing I did is I bought a new frame. And I had a cancer on my back and I couldn't even move. And I started buying components, while I was having it mailed to me. And then as I got better, I started putting the bike together, and then I got myself back in shape. Right. And I went by myself at first, to kind of say, can I do 2 miles? Can I do 5 miles? Can I do 10 miles? And then eventually I got back with my buddies. But I gave myself that goal. It's like, I'm going to ride again.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of give yourself things that you think you can do, right? And I didn't go suddenly say, I'm going to do 20 miles. I'm going to do a mile. The first thing is it is small wins. If you have small wins, then you don't have to be disappointed when you don't hit it.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting because most of us will get a win and we'll discount it. It's not enough. It's not big enough. It's not that important. So-and-so did something better. And so we rob ourselves of those little wins and it can take us out. But if you set something out in the future that you're willing to fight for, willing to experience, willing to do the hard for, then you get the bigger win. That's why Americans love a comeback story, because we like the comeback. We love that because it's inspiring. It's the human spirit at its finest. And I have my little brother about 2.5 years ago was in Turks and Caicos, and one of those big giant adult jungle gyms in the water. And he's an athlete. And he climbed up to the top and didn't really check out the lower level that he was jumping onto before he did this. He had to go to the top because he's that kind of guy. Jumped on this thing that was supposed to be a trampoline, missed the center, hit the wood, and shattered and tore all the muscles down the front of both legs. Like shredded them, blew out both his knees. They had to army crawl him out of the water. It was during COVID. He had to sit in a hospital for 5 days in his trunks, in sandy clothes, no medication, no doctors knew what they were doing. And they told him that he might not ever walk again. He finally got airlifted back to San Diego, and his first doctor that he saw said, yeah, I don't think you're going to have much hope of walking again. I've only done 1 or 2 of these. And his attitude was, no, I don't want you to do my surgery. And the next guy that showed up had done hundreds of them. And he was the one that said, you'll walk again. We'll get you there. Now, on top of that, more importantly, was his belief. And his belief was, I'm going to run a marathon. This is not the end of my story. And under a year to the date, he went to Yosemite and he shuffled through a half marathon with a group of about 20 of our coaches that went with him. And as of last week, he was able now to do squats, and he's got almost full motion back in his legs again because he didn't believe the negative story.
But the mind is very powerful. I come from, like, I spent time in Japan,
Oh,
and
yeah, you
I'm a
got that.
Buddhist. I kind of Eastern philosophy.
I am too.
There's a lot of mind over matter, right?
That's
And
correct.
you can control a lot of the things. Like if you come from a Western mindset, it might be, oh, you got to prove that to me scientifically. And if they can't, if you see something, well, that can't be because like 99% doesn't happen. And that kind of mindset can just be so self-defeating
Correct.
because you don't even have the possibility of success. You're just immediately on the down. And as if you're in life, you have to look at things. It's like every day you get up, as a cancer survivor, that's a blessing. And I know there are
That's
people
right.
that are depressed and they have all kinds of reasons why they're depressed, or they're in bad states. But once you get through something like that, you start to look at things. Every day that I'm here and I'm breathing is a win, right? And then from
Like
there,
every day.
I can stack up even more. So
Correct.
it's a different point of view. You gotta have a different mind frame. You gotta frame it. And it's how you frame it. It's like why you go to life coaches and mindset coaches is to kind of
To change that.
reprogram your brain.
Well, we call them neural pathways. And when we grow up, we develop our belief systems very largely by what happened to us and by the people that raised us. Now, some of us had great parents that had great mindsets. I would say on the average, that's probably about 10% of the people I talk to.
Mm,
Most people have had parents that made mistakes. They've had all kinds of trauma. Bad things have happened. But the thing that I learned, and this was working with Tony, is that I learned that my choice, my emotions are a decision. And so when I got diagnosed with MS, I was angry. I was pissed. It was probably the worst thing I could hear. And I even said it would have been easier if I had cancer because I knew there would be a drop dead date and I'm done. But with
mhm.
MS, there's no cure. It's
Yeah.
extremely painfully expensive. It was very debilitating. And I bought the narrative that the medical professionals gave me: go home and go to bed. This is your life. You're done. And when I finally recognized that they could have been wrong, and that's if anybody's out there right now and somebody told you you can't do something or your job is over or your life is over, my question that I want to ask them is, what if they're wrong?
Yeah.
What if they're wrong? Because so many of us, like Mark, my brother, if he had taken those doctors' first opinions, he would have sat in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, miserable and unhappy. But because he challenged it and he went, I don't think you know what you're talking about. You don't know me and what I can do. What if they're wrong? And so I based my life choices on the option. What if there's another option in play I'm not seeing? Because I'm
Yeah.
believing one option. And as you know, in Buddhism, we have many options.
But there's a lot of possibilities as a mindset is like in terms of expansive mindset
Correct.
versus like a limiting belief mindset.
Correct.
And I've always people like, in music, people want to put you in a niche.
Mhm.
They want to say, well, what do you do? And my whole thing is I told my PRP was like, I do expansive sounds. Like, what's that? I was like, well, I kind of cross genre. I do whatever I'm gonna do. Like one day it's my country, one day it's EDM, one day punk, it might be jazz, it might be whatever. It's like whatever I feel at the moment. And they don't know what to do with that
Right.
because they want to put you, and that's how life is. People want to put you
In a box.
in a box. And it's like in the way the world is today, like if you stay in that box, you're probably gonna miss out. You're
You're
probably
done.
gonna lose because the things are shifting so fast with AI and all the tech and all the things going on with global warming. If you whatever worked 5 years ago, 10 years
Doesn't work.
ago, doesn't necessarily
That's
gonna isn't gonna work. And so
that's
you
right.
have to start to look into yourself and say, what is the secret sauce that I have that makes me different than anybody else? And then kind of
Oh, I have something for you for that.
use that because that is what's going to put you ahead. Like what you can do that nobody else can do. And then you own it. You start to own it.
Well, we
And
have a thing that I have my clients use. We call it the badass list. And most people have been taught from birth not to talk about their strengths and their wins. Don't get too big for your britches. Oh, you don't want to make so and so feel bad. Don't brag about your A. And so we have a process that we go through at the men's group that I'm partnering in. And one of their first exercises is to write out 50 things in their life. It could start from kindergarten on up that makes them a badass. Did they kick the winning field goal? Did they win the spelling bee? Did they help an old lady across the street and somebody saw it and they got in the paper? Did they, what makes them uniquely wonderful? But most people don't take the time to see that. All they see is what they didn't do, what the grade they didn't get, the way they didn't get the promotion, the job they didn't have. The problem with that is that we're missing our divinity and our purpose on being here, and it's not to be in the box. I have a real aversion to boxes. I don't like them. They're suffocating.
Well, you're keeping up with the Joneses. Everybody's like, well, I got to have that, McMansion. I got to have this car. I got to have this suit. I have this thing. And it's like, is that really going to, like when people say, I'm going $1 million. Like, why do you want the $1 million?
Yeah, what's
do you want like independence? Do you want to have your own business? You don't have to have $1 million to do that. Right? So there's like what you're looking for might be the wrong thing because you're in the comparison trap. You're thinking that actually is what's going to make you happy without actually looking in the looking glass like a poet, like a Victorian poet. The looking glass self is like, what is it that makes you tick? And actually doing the work to figure out like what makes you tick, not what the Joneses make, what makes the Joneses tick.
Not even what your parents told you should tick. That's the other thing is most people have the narratives of their parents in their head and never stop to ask, what if they were wrong? What if that no longer serves me? What if that isn't me? What if that is an outdated belief system? What if there are other options existing for me? And so it's an independence of thought and spiritual connection, whatever that is for you. But I believe that each of us is uniquely here for a divine purpose, whatever that is. Because I don't believe, you have to look at the uniqueness. There's not one human being that's the same. Even twins, identical. They're not the same. So in that, there's a beauty to that. And it's part of the divine tapestry of life. If you start trying to be somebody else, then we don't get the color you're supposed to bring. We don't get the music you're supposed to bring. We don't get the skills you're supposed to bring because you're trying to be one of the Joneses. We already have them. So there's this unique dance. It's why I love coaching, because each client has a totally different set of beliefs, values, influences, traumas, story, and I get to go in and help them rewrite it to what they want it to be, to create the masterpiece they want to live in. And it's a pretty fun job. I love what I do. I've been doing it now 25 years, which is pretty much miraculous because I get bored. But there's no getting bored in coaching.
Well, again, every person you meet is like, if you're a producer, you meet an artist, is like, you never meet anybody who's exactly the same. Like and each individual is so different. And it's like, that's why you have to try not to have cookie cutter approaches.
Yeah.
So this idea, like your program you created for betrayal trauma, I was going to ask in terms like, sometimes we portray ourselves. Like we might have like somebody that was the source of a feeling of betrayal, but sometimes we portray ourselves because of our own kind of limiting beliefs or, imposter syndrome. So when you talk about your program for betrayal trauma, maybe you can kind of go soup to nuts, like
a little bit of what that is.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you're right. Betrayal shows up in a lot of different ways. How it showed up in my life it's been kind of a domino effect. My parents somewhat betrayed me by being alcoholics and not making me feel safe. That started very young. Over time, they betrayed me by fighting and sharing their ugly stories, and I got too much information as a kid. They betrayed me by making me become the grown-up in the space. So that was my childhood betrayal. I had betrayals from friends, but when I got married, and the first big betrayal was I had my husband cheat on me with many, many people. It was very public in the town I grew up in, very humiliating. And it had gone on for a long time. Everybody knew but me. And I lost my mind. When I found out, I became a Looney Tune, literally lost my mind. I did pull a gun on him. I did tap his phone. I did follow him. I did all the crazy things that comes with that shattering in your soul. Didn't like who I was then. It was horrifying to me. I was the ugliest I can honestly say I've ever been. It was embarrassing. It was horrible. Fast track, got remarried. Was married 25 years and had an experience where that husband also betrayed me. His was a lot more intense and it went for a lot longer. And he contracted a deadly STD that could have put my life at risk. By the time I'd gotten to that one, all this work that I'm sharing with you, the things that I did, I wanted to go through that betrayal with love and compassion. I wanted to do it differently. And I wanted to test all this stuff I said I know. Does it really work in the heat of the moment? And I was able to go through that betrayal with love and compassion for myself first, and also for him. I didn't, I mean, I can't say I didn't want to shoot him once or twice, but I didn't. But it got to the place where I recognized that in society, when I went to look for something to support me in that whole thing, there really wasn't anything that fit my niche, what I wanted. I didn't want a full-blown Christian experience, and I didn't want the angry psychology experience. And there's a lot of belief in the betrayal space that I deserve to blow up your world. Everybody said, go empty his bank accounts, get a good attorney, take him to the cleaners, burn his clothes, throw out all his stuff. That's really out there. That's a big online dialogue that's going on everywhere. And I went, that's not who I want to be. That's not who I am anymore. It's not even who I want to be. It's not even who I am. And so when I went through the process of building the betrayal program out, it is specifically to help people who don't want to get ugly and go insane, who want to be their best self in the middle of the worst hurt they've ever experienced. And who do they want to be on the other side? Who do they want to walk out of that fire as? And so I bring all the 25 years of tools and training and all the Tony Robbins work and all the different pieces of all kind of clicked together to create an 8-week course that allows people to be supported in the moment of trauma. So they're not out there alone. They have support. They get to have creative ideas and ways to pull them out of the dark, because a lot of times they'll retreat so far inward that it's really hard to get them out. I do a lot of work with people who've been betrayed by employers or clients, friendships, family members, children. And then ultimately, to your bigger point, we betray ourselves daily when we trash talk ourselves, when we make promises that we don't keep. I'm not going to smoke tomorrow. And I smoke, and thankfully I don't smoke, but let's just use that as an example. That's a betrayal of myself. When I say I'm going to get up and do something and I don't do it, when I promise something to somebody else knowing I'm not going to deliver, that's a true betrayal of what I have said I am about. So I violate my own core values when I don't stay true to what I said I will do, what I want, or how I want to show up. So it's all woven into that program to help all of those different people get to the other side of that experience. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a really deep, answer that you went through a lot. And it seems like, there's a lot of issues where people, they want maybe what feels good, or they want to have that kind of, payback versus like a karmic experiences where you're going to take the high road. And it's a hard thing to take the high road. It seems like, well, how can I do that? I'm kind of I'm not valuing my own pain because I'm trying to be a better self. But it's like, maybe you are valuing, because if you put yourself where you're like, it's not revenge, it's not payback, it's actually, I'm going to end up in a better place. And I can maybe even understand the other person that put me in this situation, right? And then kind of feel like, oh, now I understand who they are. And maybe I never really understood who they are. And now I understand who I am too. And so you take it as like, you know what, they actually help me. Like, and some people were like, how could that be? But sometimes you leave a bad employer, like, well, they help me understand, like, this is not where I should be.
When people get fired, I coach people all the time. They get fired and they go completely into the tank, but they don't understand. And I have a primary group of questions I use with my clients that have really been helpful for me. And one of my first questions, like when that last betrayal, the big one that showed up in my world, in the moment of finding out, it was a very traumatic way that I found out. In that moment, because I had hardwired my brain through other parts of my life, I rewired those neural pathways. Rather than wanting to go pick up a shotgun, this time my first thought was, okay, Melissa, where in this is the gift? It's my primary question, because I have a belief now. I didn't have it years ago, but I have a firm belief that I would die on, is that in everything there is a gift. And I deal with some real serious trauma. My closest girlfriend was molested by her father from the time she was an infant until she was 18. Her brothers were murdered 2 separate murders. And people don't understand why she's love and light. And they want her to get mad. When we share the stage together and we talk about our stories, they get righteous indignation on our behalf. And they want us to get pissed. And the thing that is really hard is helping them understand that there are gifts in it all. If it hadn't happened to her, she wouldn't be coaching and saving all these people in the depths of their pain. She would understand it. If I hadn't gone through all the crap I'd gone through, I wouldn't be here sharing this with you. And I'm sure there's somebody out there today that needed to hear this conversation. We might save a life today. That would be the gift.
That's the point people don't get is like going through it, like you can't be a good captain of a ship if you never go through a storm.
That's right. You
And
can't.
the only way you're going to be a good trainer, right, is you went through the storm. You know how to handle the crazy waves. You know how to handle the bad weather. If everything was perfect,
you would
well,
know.
how are you going to be able to handle it, right? Like if you don't,
well, you'd know it intellectually. You could read the book, but you don't have the gut knowing.
Not actually going through it. Like going through it, like puts you in the position to be like a sensei. You can be a teacher. You can be a coach, like because you actually have the life experience and you've learned the value in the fact that like everything that happens doesn't always have to be roses, you know.
And it won't be. Sorry, but it's not going to be.
Yeah,
guarantee it's not gonna.
Things the thorns actually teach you a lot, right?
That's right.
That's what people do. It's like smelling the great, you know, scent of a flower is like, you know, sometimes that thorn is actually going to teach you a lot more.
That's right. Well, I have a phrase that I use a lot, and it's the brightness of my light is in direct proportion of the darkness I walked out of. You can't have light without dark. You cannot see the light if there's not darkness to compare it to. You can't have joy without sadness because you need the context. And so as humans, somewhere along the way, that fairy tale belief that everything should be beautiful and perfect and my prince is going to ride in on a horse and we're going to ride off into the sunset and it's all going to be perfect. That's a BS story that a lot of people have been taught, and they're disappointed when life doesn't show up that way. And so they start making life wrong. They make themselves wrong. I did something, I don't deserve this. But the point of this is that I know and I'm grateful for the darkness, because the darkness means that my light is that much brighter. It means that I can help people that are extremely in the dark because I know the way out. I have the lantern that can help guide them out of their darkness. So for me, I don't want to take any of those ugly things and any of that hideous stuff that happened as a child or in my life and take it away, because it is part of the divine tapestry of me. And it gives me a skill set that allows me to connect with just about anybody in pain. And that, I wouldn't want to get rid of that. That's a superpower.
I was going to say that's your secret superpower. That's how you can be a phenomenal coach, is because, like, you know, everybody's always looking at the metrics, you know, always looking like, oh, I got 1 million views. I got 1 billion streams on Spotify. It's like, no, you know, to me, it's like, I was looking at guys like Lou Reed.
Yeah.
Right? Lou Reed, you know, until he got Walk on the Wild Side, he wasn't really winning. Right. But the critics and other musicians that heard his stuff in the Velvets, they thought he was winning, but commercially he wasn't.
Right.
And so, and you know, you think about William Blake. William Blake was one of the greatest Victorian poets. He was not known in his time. He's known after his death as one of the greatest Victorian poets. The one thing he did was he put all his poems into metal etchings, and they found them in a farmhouse.
Isn't that crazy?
So he kind of knew that he should make it like eternal by putting on these plates, right? So the songs of innocence and experience are on these metal plates with all this art embedded in it. And I found that story. I said, well, that's really incredible. He's like one of the greatest poets of that era, but he was not known in his era. And so it kind of shows you
Tesla died broke.
Yeah, it's like a belief.
That's right.
You know, if you have that belief, sometimes it even goes beyond you. You know, the next generation finds that you were important. So you have to believe that you're important enough.
It's interesting because there's a thing out in the spiritual world and in the coaching space, and it's called toxic positivity. And there are a lot of people that when they hear me talk about this, they go, that's toxic positivity. And it's not. I'm not saying you're not going to feel the pain. The pain is there for a reason. The pain is there to make change a must. Without pain, people don't change. Rarely do they change unless there's pain. They
Mhm.
don't have a reason to change. Until they're 300 pounds, I don't need to quit eating donuts.
Yeah.
So the same thing is true for us, is that the pain is necessary, but when I make the pain a superpower is when I transmute that into what's good about what I learned, the lesson. Like,
Mhm.
why did I get fired? Well, because I was asked to the people I was working with. I didn't show up for work. I didn't like my job. Whatever it is, there's a lesson in it for me, and it makes me better next time. It also saves me from a job I didn't like. I would have stayed in that marriage forever with a subconscious knowing something was wrong and tolerating less than I deserved. But because it was so big and such a hard stop, I couldn't avoid it. I got to say, thank you for playing. 25 years was great, but I can no longer be in this space with you. And I'm going to release you with love. And there's a great quote that I got out of one of my meditations. And it's, he was part of my journey. He is not my destination. And I can
Mhm.
release him in love. That was freedom for me, because I did love him. Just because he screwed up doesn't mean I stopped loving him. It makes the pain even worse because I love him. But at the same time, I get to decide, do I love myself enough to choose me to do life differently? And
Yeah,
in that was freedom.
because like
Freedom.
people have their lives and they think that there's a soulmate they're supposed to, but it's like there are
No.
things that are like moments in time,
That's
right?
right.
There's certain moments in time that you had that moment, you should be grateful for that moment, but it doesn't mean that that moment's going to continue, right?
That's right.
That things are going to change, and people are scared to change, even if what they're in is like a codependent, negative, toxic thing. It could be that I have a toxic boss, but it pays my mortgage.
That's right.
And so then you keep on going because until something gets critical mass where you get
True.
fired or you quit or you get mad and you're
Or you get sick.
sick or something happens and you, okay, well, I'm going to get out of it. But you were kind of, you wait to hit critical mass without kind of doing the work. Then the lesson learned is like, if I see this again, I'm actually going to listen to what's going on. I'm going to have situational awareness instead
Correct.
of saying, don't throw it under the rug, suck it up, forget about it. You have to start to build like your response techniques, you know?
But if they want to and they learn from it, then one of the things they get to go is, okay, what do I want to take away from this? And who do I want to be on the other side? And what does this mean for my future? What gifts are in this for me? Again, it goes back to, where's the gift? Well, if I hadn't gotten fired, I would have stayed in a crummy job, accepted half the pay I should have been earning, doing something I hated. My life sucked, but I would have stayed because it was the path of least resistance.
Mhm.
People get lazy.
Yeah,
We get
totally.
emotionally and spiritually lazy. And so we tolerate those things because we don't want to go do the hard. Most people get to a place where they avoid doing hard things. And so when that happens, that's part of why we have a society of people right now that don't want to work. They believe they should be president. They just come out of college and I should be making $500,000 a year and be the boss. And I should only work 2 days a week. That's because we taught them that life shouldn't be hard and that everyone gets a trophy and everyone should be playing in the same pond because we're all there, but it's
Everybody's
not
gonna win.
true.
Yeah, everybody's gonna get the gold medal because that's
Yeah.
not the way it is.
No, it's not. So let's stop lying to people. Sorry, it's going to be hard. Life is hard. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
you.
it's
Life's
yeah,
hard.
but yeah, it was in my life, I'm a software engineer, and I used to be in Fortune 500 companies, and I decided to go independent because I was like a hamster on a wheel. I was like a road
Right.
warrior, always traveling Sunday to Thursday, and you know what? It's like I wasn't really happy, so I decided to go and be a consultant, and so
And
I
do it
kind of
on your
do
own.
things like I'm able to do this job because I said, well, what do I value? I value my creative spirit, but the old me was like valuing that rat race and only the rat race. And that's
Well,
the who
it
I am.
must have given you something. It gave you stability. It gave you
Yeah, it
certainty.
gave me
It gave you something,
the money.
and
But
money.
if you have the money, don't have the time,
That's right. It's
then you
trading
like
time for
then you
money.
feel you can like you can have I know a lot of people that were doing really well. They got the cars, they got this, but they weren't happy
No,
because it's like they're not really able to do what they really want to do, but they're kind of stuck on the rat,
on that wheel.
on the wheel. And it's like, is that where we really want to be, or do you decide that sometimes it's not the money. Sometimes it's like a balance of, do I have enough to be, you know, not, in trouble, but actually enough to be able to feel the world and have my ideals or my concepts, like be able to put them out there, be able to do it, and like feel like you have a voice. I think a lot of people feel like they don't have a
Scary.
voice,
That's
right?
right.
And then they wonder, like, how do I get my voice? Well, you probably got to speak up.
Well, you have to try to use it, but the thing is that fear robs us of so many things. And there's such a great acronym for fear, and it's false evidence appearing real. It's one of my favorite acronyms, is that fear is a lie. People get that one of the biggest fears human beings have is to stand on stage and speak. I don't know anyone that's died from standing up next to a microphone. So it's a lie. But we are taught certain beliefs that we have to adhere to survive in a family or a company or a relationship, and we buy into their fears. And what starts to happen is we lose our own personal voice. So to me, that's why I don't like the box. The box robs me of my voice. And so I'm one of those people that likes to blow up the box. I don't do well in the box. And so that's one of the reasons why coaching's been really good for me, because it is
Yeah.
my company. I can do whatever the hell I want and talk to whomever I want about whatever I want. And there's freedom there. But it wasn't always easy to get here. I mean, starting out, I was broke. I worked 80 hours a week. I took anybody that wanted to have a coaching call. It was very much a grind.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I did it, I knew I was getting closer to helping somebody else. And when you get those clients that come back and say, you changed my life, that's enough to keep me going for another 6 months and give me more clients and give me more places to help people. Because I believe that as human beings, we need those fixes, like you talking to people on the podcast. You get to talk to people, engage, and help somebody out there in your audience feel better, find a solution, change their life. I don't think there's anything more powerful for the human spirit than to help another human being out of suffering. At least for me.
Yeah, it's a master class. I mean, people say, if you're in the podcast game because you're trying to be like Joe Rogan, like not to put him down, but you're trying to get numbers like that, right?
Right.
So, like, that's not always the point. The point is sometimes it's who you reach
That's
and
right.
what you learn. To me, is every time I talk to somebody, I'm getting a master class in something I didn't know, because I didn't know who they were, and I didn't know how they see the world. And every time you get to talk to another human being and you get a different vision of the world through their eyes, through their voice, I think you learn a lot, because that kind of oral history that we've always learned before we even go to college, the human beings is just the oral tradition of learning things and talking to people. And some people lose that and they just get book knowledge, which is not bad to have book knowledge, but sometimes it's good to have that oral history communication, human to human.
Right.
And that to me is super valuable, and you can't measure it with metrics, right?
No.
It's what you're going to get out of it and how you process it. It's the lessons learned in your life.
It's powerful. There's something really beautiful in being witness to the light going on in someone's eyes when they thought that it was over. There's no point. I don't like my life. No one loves me. And when I get to witness and help walk them through the dark and they come into the light and I get to see the light go on for them, there is nothing more powerful for me, because I know what that feels like to finally see the light. I know how it feels in the body. I know how it feels in your heart when you finally go, oh my God, there is a reason for me to be here. And it's beautiful. When that happens, no one can take that away. No one can ever rob that from that person ever again. And so it's a beautiful gift that I get to experience, that they share that ride with me. And it's also a gift I get to give back from what I've learned to help people out of suffering.
Yeah, it's like you're passing it on. It's like
Yeah.
It's the whole idea is like, if you can help another human being to stop them from losing ground and help them gain like higher ground and start to find that better self and actually understand.
Yep.
It's not always gonna be something that's easy. It's a lot of people are looking for like the quick fix. Like they
want the pill. Give me
they
the
want
pill.
the pill. They're like, in 10 steps, I'm going to be done. It's like, well, usually, like if you have an addiction, you're gonna probably have to live with that your whole life. It's not just gonna go away because
Right.
you went through the 12 steps. You got to work at it,
Yeah.
right? And it's like not over if you fall off the wagon. It's a process, and the people have to understand. Like you have to always be working
Yeah,
in
you
that
do.
in that space. And some people think, yeah, there's just a quick answer to everything. It's like, no, it's not an easy fix. It's like, well, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't try it just because it's hard. Like it's like we want to make things easier,
We
and it's
yeah,
like, yeah,
no.
maybe
Make
that's
it stronger. Don't make it easier. We've already got a generation of who's had it easy and they suck. No, stop making it easier. Help us be stronger. Help us be smarter. Give us more resilience, but don't make it easier. You
yeah,
don't learn anything by making it easier. In
yeah,
order to build muscle, you increase the weight and the reps. You don't take the reps away. You don't take the weight away. You make me stronger. When I'm strong, I can do anything. And that's the power of what coaching does. I get to help people learn where their emotional and spiritual and physical muscles are. And I get to see them build that. So when the hard happens, they don't buckle. They don't
yeah,
go jump off a cliff. They know they can walk through the fire and come out on the other side purified and stronger. That's bomb. That's so
yeah.
cool.
We have to learn how to shake it off. You see an animal
Yeah.
like a deer running away, gets away from a wolf or something, and they kind of shake it off.
Yeah.
Like they said, people have lost their ability to know how to shake it off. They've kind of lost things that human beings knew how to do these things, but somehow we've lost it because we started getting these paradigms,
Yeah.
and we lost touch with our pure humanity. They lost touch of like some of the instinctual kind of things that we lost. And you have to kind of have a spiritual, mind and body. It's like a multiple legs.
Right.
And then people make a mistake of working on one leg. They work on the mind, don't work on the body. We work on the soul, but don't work on the other aspects of your pillars. If you
Right.
just focus on one, you're going to be out of balance.
Well, you think about it. You go to the gym and all you do is squats over and over and over. You get massive legs. And you've probably seen people like this at the gym. It's pretty hilarious. They have huge legs and little weeny arms and they have a beer belly, but they've got bitchin' legs. It's the balance. That's the beauty of the human spirit is learning the dance of how to create and hit all the moves, not just one. And
Mhm.
so I think that's what makes us a beautiful species is when we choose to learn to dance and find all the ways we can be stronger, all the ways we can improve, all the ways we can add value to the planet and to others. That to me that's a deeper reason to be alive than to go to work every day, retire, live in your house, and then die. That
Yeah,
has nothing for me. I got
yeah,
nothing there that says, oh, let me ride that ride. I don't want
yeah.
that ride.
There's so many niche things where I think a lot of people don't work on being the kind of Renaissance type of person, like work on like everything. And it's hard because well, you're not gonna be good at everything, right? So then people want to work on the thing they're good at. So they only do the squats because that's what I'm good at. I'm not good to the other things. And it's like
But how do you broaden?
yeah, I mean it's like it's the work because like that's where the hard part is. Like you go and you do. Like, if you're a musician, like, I'm not really good at leads, like, well, you gotta focus on the leads. If you're good at the chords, well, you're good at the chords, try something else, right?
Right.
So you have to kind of push out of your comfort zone and, tends to be, is a human thing. It's like, well, I don't want to push outside my comfort zone. So that's like the core problem. You keep on going around and around, and then you gotta, go to a coach, you go to a mentor, you have to
That's
have
right.
some discipline, right? So there's like
When you go to someone that pushes you out of the box, they blow the box up because here's what I believe. Your comfort zone is where all your dreams go to die. You
Mhm.
do not live your dreams in your comfort zone. That's where they go to die. And so if we know that my dreams are on the other side of all the fear in the way, my dreams are on the other side of the hard thing, but I have to get up and do the work to get and experience my dream. That's what makes those dreams so solid and so powerful. That's again goes back to that comeback story. I had a dream, all bad things happened, I didn't quit, and then I get the big win. That's what we all want. But how many are willing to do the work? Have you ever
Yeah.
seen the movie Rudy?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Love that movie. That's just one of hundreds, right? But that guy was relentless. Everybody told him it would never happen. You're just too fat. You're too slow. You don't have the money, whatever it was. He never quit and he was willing to do the hard and whatever it took. And that's why he had that moment. That's why he's famous.
Hmm.
That one comeback story wasn't because he got it handed to him on a plate. He didn't get drafted. He walked on as a poor, broke kid. And to me, to that's what's so important for people to know out there. All of us have a comeback story. All of us do. Do you want to win? Then do the hard. Get the win on the other side of the hard thing. Do that. That's where your self-confidence and your courage come from.
Yeah, it's that resilience. Like, and sometimes, it's not maybe like the thing that people focus on because they just want to do like 0 to 100. They suddenly just like, well, I just want to be at 100. Like, well, you can't just get to 100 without
No.
going through. It's like, a lot of times, there's this thing in music where like there's no bad note, but there's an opportunity. So you could keep on going back and going back to the top. You just go back to the top,
Right.
go back to the top. Or you could take that misstep and actually evolve the song. Right. You could actually take it like Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock. Herbie
Yep.
Hancock hit a wrong chord and Miles didn't stop the song. He matched what Herbie did and changed the song.
Which is
Right.
cool.
That's how you evolve the song, and that's how you kind of show that you can live in the moment and you can see that there's a different path, there's a different way to do it instead of just playing like
The
you
same
know
thing.
the same thing. If you just keep on playing, like the same, you get like a band like the Eagles, and they actually penalized their band when they were doing the Hotel California if they didn't hit the same notes that were on the record. And
Wow.
everybody in the band was kind of getting bored. It's
No
just such a
kidding.
great piece of music, and then you got guys like Joe Walsh and stuff getting bored, like telling him he got to play that solo the same way every night.
That
Why
gets
would
old.
why would you make Joe do that? That's not what Joe likes to do. Like Joe would rather feel that moment and represent that moment instead of making him repeat what he did in the studio 2 years, like a year ago. Why would he want to do that? A lot of people like Zappa we used to say, like, I'm never playing my
The
solo the
same
same
note
way.
twice. Yeah.
I'm not doing it because that's not fun for me and I'm not gonna do it.
But see, that also comes back to mastery. People that are masters of their craft can go up and play with the other note. They know how to walk it back to the get back on key. They know how to do that dance. That comes from years of practice, years of doing the hard. So the thing that's beautiful about that is giving them the stage and giving them freedom to do what they're good at. And that means sometimes they hit a wrong note and go down a whole other different road. But that leads me back to Prince. How many of
Yeah,
his songs came from playing outside the box and not playing the same note twice?
yeah.
To
It's
me,
just this mindset of like, why not? He was the most experimental
mhm,
musician to be a pop star, you know, probably since David Bowie.
he was fearless.
Because he would go and do stuff against what everybody told me, like pull the bass line out of When Doves Cry,
Yep,
leave things in a state where Warner's would come and tell him that that's a demo. So no, that's the way it's going out. And they say, well, no. And they say, no, the song's going out where it sounds like you say it sounds like a demo. It actually sounds different than everything because you think it's unfinished, but it's not unfinished. And
that's
sometimes
exactly
his
how it's
big
supposed to be.
magical power was the fact that he left the space
Yep,
between the notes in a lot of his compositions without filling it up because he was confident to leave the space.
that's right.
And a
It
lot of
didn't
people in
scare
his
him.
life,
The
they don't
space
do that.
didn't scare him. He knew what that space represented, and I think that's a great analogy for us as human beings. We have a tendency to want to fill all the spaces of thought, of relationship, of food, of whatever it is. There's this need to keep filling. But what if we got comfortable in the gap?
Yeah.
There's a gap. Every time you take a breath, there's a gap at the top. That's where life is lived, that gap between breaths. And so the same thing's true as a musician. Get comfortable with the gap. Get
Yeah.
comfortable with the note. I
It's like
love that.
it's like listening skills. And sometimes like people like they spend too much time hearing their own voice
Mhm.
rather than actually listening. And that leads you to kind of fill the space where you like, did you really need to fill that space in that
Yep.
conversation, or did you need to process what the other person said and really think about it instead of trying to win the conversation? actually, did you actually comprehend what they were telling you? Right.
Most people they don't slow down long enough for that because it's not about them, about the other person. It's about me. And so it's a unique part of the human relationships is learning the art of listening and learning to be comfortable in the gap and not making those gaps wrong. And then the other piece that's really even more important is learning to be okay with the silence in your own head, giving yourself that space to take the pause up here so that not everybody else's voices are all doing the narrative inside. To me, that's where true peace is lived, is when I can learn how to let those voices go and allow the silence and not be afraid of that, to see what comes up. There's beauty there. There's truth there. And for most of us, that's where all our answers really are. We don't need anybody to really tell us who we need to be and what we need to be doing. We know. Very few people don't know. If somebody put a gun to their kid's head and said, I'm coming back and I'm going to shoot Johnny if you don't figure this out in 30 days, guess what? They're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
They're going to figure it out. And so we have a tendency to really minimize our own personal strength. We minimize the commitments we make to ourselves, and we give up on ourselves way too often. And so that, again, it's again the beauty of coaching. It's why sports players have coaches. Imagine the Super Bowl if they didn't have coaches on both sides of the field. Imagine that game.
Yeah,
you're going to have guys crying in the corner. You're going to have guys walking off the field. You're going to have fist fights. You're going to have all kinds of chaos. So there does need to be somebody, just like an conductor in an orchestra, lead singer in a band, whatever. You always need someone to help keep the wheels on the cart going the right way.
Yeah, keep it going. You got to have the recording engineer and the producer to kind of keep it from going off the rails.
Right.
You know.
That's true.
But you always hit the hour mark faster than I ever think. And, we hit it again. Yeah. And it's like, that's always interesting. But we do have your Instagram there again, and people will be able to click through on that. Is that the best place for people to reach you, or do you want to use another way?
Let me give you the one that's really good. They can reach me at www.melissavonmusser.com.
Yeah, or if send that in private chat, I can throw that up.
And a betrayed heart. If anybody's out there wanting information on the betrayed heart program, they can do that too. And I'll just I put it in the chat for you.
Okay. I'm going to grab it and create another banner before we leave. Just throw it out there. So
I would love, if anybody needs to talk to somebody, if they're looking for a coach, let me know. And if I'm not a good fit, I have many, many people in my orbit that are. Don't suffer alone. Just don't suffer out there alone, because there's people that are here that want to help you.
That's a very important thing to end on. And we do have your new link there, and that'll be fully clickable on all the descriptions of the podcast that were distributed on. And we were just on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We'll be on all the other major platforms by tomorrow, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon. So again, thank you for being on our show. We do appreciate you took the time to be on the Family Electricals podcast, and have a great night.
You too, honey. Thanks so much. It's been real.
Thank you.